Now that we know where to place our tests and how to run them, we're going to take a look at how to use Jest to actually test code. Let's take a look at several methods that allow us to write assertions. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove this and write a new test. It should check for equal values. So we expect the number 5 to equal number 5. Let's run the test. That obviously passes. So toEqual does nothing more than check that the value that is passed into toEqual is equal to the value that is passed into expect. Also, you can use toBe instead of toEqual as an alias, but I'm going to stick to toEqual. The handy thing about toEqual or toBe is that it also does a deep equality check. So let's create a new test. It should check for equal values using deep equality. Oops, equality. So anytime we use toEqual on an object or an array, it does a deep equality check to check for the value rather than checking the reference of that object. What that means in JavaScript is that an empty array does not equal an empty array. However, using deep equality checks, it checks the array for values, which is undefined in this case, and that is true. So this feature allows us to easily check the results of arrays and objects. For example, we expect an object with a key foo and a value of 5 to equal that same object. Now if we run that, that's going to pass as well. We can do the same thing for an array, for example. So 1, 2, 3 should equal an array containing 1, 2, 3. For arrays, we have a special method called toContain, which allows us to check that an array contains a certain value. So it should check that an array contains a specific value. So we expect an array of 1, 2, 3 to contain the number 2. If we run that, that passes as well. And let me just go ahead and copy this. And let's see if this also supports objects or arrays. Now let's change this here to contain 2 objects. So foo5 and let's say foo6. And this should contain this object. Now if I run that, you'll see that it fails. That's because this is checking by value and not by equality. So to check for equality in an array, you would use toContain equal instead. And then when we run this, that passes as well. And lastly, we'll take a look at spies. Spies are basically mock functions that allow us to inspect those functions to assert whether they've been called, with which arguments, and so on. So let's create a new test. It should support spies. And we'll store that spy in a variable. And the way we create a spy is by calling the fn method on the Jest global. This is also a global, you don't need to import it. So now if we call that spy, we can then inspect the spy and we expect it to have been called. Let's run our test. All right. We can also, for example, expect it to be called 2 times. So to have been called times, and then we'll say 2. That also passes. And lastly, we can also check for the arguments passed into the method. So let's say I'm passing in a string. It should have been called with the string foo. So that's pretty much it for the Jest API we'll be using in this course. The methods we've used so far are fairly simple, and it's pretty much going to stay that way. But if you'd like to know more about Jest, I highly recommend checking out their documentation.